Please join me in welcoming Colin to the stage.
Thank you, Rich, and welcome all. On our family group chat today, one of my sons said, "Dad, have fun at your Luddite convention." And I'm glad that Rich introed us out of that notion that this is not a Luddite convention, but rather, I would put it as a common sense convention. And I mean that quite literally, that we're not going to be a bunch of experts coming up here and talking to you as if we've arrived in the golden zone of knowledge about all this, but rather, if anything, that we're going to glean from all of our experience as faculty and teachers at the Heights, been around for a long time now, working with thousands of parents who have done this well, who have struggled with it, like all of us, who have made mistakes, working with the students and mentees who have, some of them done it well, all of them made mistakes, and it's that experience coming together and seeing what is a way through that we can do this sensibly. How can we use this tool well, which is the goal of what we're trying to inculcate in our children. And generally, I think that comes down to two things. One, establishing good habits, and two, as much as possible, guaranteeing that the content will be good. And I know Joe Cardenas is going to talk about those two areas later on, but just to have those in mind, that's what we're thinking about. And if we think about this tool in particular, I mean, I'm saying this tool, it's a number of different things, but, screen tech, and for the purposes of this talk, it'll largely be talking about smartphones, but others can be included in this. We don't have a long time to train them. If you think of the other tools we have in our house or around the yard, we could train them for, over a long period of time. I have one son who's off at college, a sophomore in college, so, my training in that area is really, it's over. I mean, I can kind of guide him from afar, but, and it's not something that we want to begin this training too early, as Rich and Al and Joe are going to talk about in their talks as well. So it's a short window that we have to train them to use this well. Like I said, I have one who's kind of beyond this zone. I have two teenagers who are still at home or very much in this zone that I'm working actively with. And then I have two who are a long way off and that I'm thinking about, and I'm thinking actually about them when I wrote some of these things down. So how to understand this talk in contrast to the ones that you're going to hear later, what I'm hoping to suggest are some internal guides, or rather guides that can help us foster the internal attitudes that are going to help our sons do this well and use technology well in their life ahead, as opposed to, say, the external protections that Rich will get into in specificity. So with internal, me as a moral theology teacher, I'm going to talk a lot about virtue, right? This stable disposition to do good. We want it to be stable. We want it to be this disposition that's sort of internalized and part of them, not just something that they're going to be guided on from the outside. We're not only thinking and interested in behavioral aspects of how they're using technology, but how they're really approaching it from an internal side. I was thinking about this a little bit when at Mass the other day we had most of our lower school, but I think particularly our third grade was all there. And I'm looking at all of them, and their behavior is really good in Mass. And they're kneeling really respectfully, and most of them, their eyes forward, and they're all quiet. And I'm just thinking, gosh, this is such a beautiful sight. I wonder what's going on in their hearts. Beautiful, innocent prayers some of them must be having. And I noticed one boy who's turned directly to his classmate next to him, eyeing him from inches away, with the entire length of his tie inside of his mouth. And he's pulling it tip first out of his mouth towards his friend, right? Like, right, well, I know what's going on in his heart, right? And like, so that was not hard to do. But the other ones, right? We're interested not just in their outward behavior and actions, but what's going on in their hearts. What virtues are they learning? What can we do as parents to help guide those? So, the rules, yes, rules are really important. We're going to need to establish some good rules. I'll touch on those briefly. Rich will hit them a lot harder. But what they have as just sort of that stable disposition going forward, that's what we're looking for, because the external protections, they're necessary. But what I'm interested in is what can we do to help them for those moments when no one's looking, when we're not there to enforce the rules, or when those external protections are not 100% guaranteed. And I think some of the guys later, especially Rich, will say that they really never are. But in the end, we hope to trust our children. We want to be able to trust that they will do good, that they will do the right thing. And for that, a few things are necessary. We need to build up to that trust. Right? We're not quite there yet, and they're not quite there yet. So some of these suggestions are going to be for those of us who have young sons and how we're going to prep them to get to this point. Some will be relevant for in the thick of it with our teenagers right now who are going through this. All of it, I hope, will provide some principles that can inform our decisions as we guide our children through this. The three suggestions I would offer, the three categories I'll break down this talk into that we can do to help our sons, our children. The first is training, proper training. The second is modeling good behavior and good use of the technology. And third is establishing an intimate and personal relationship with our children. So first, training. Trust does not mean that we think our children are going to be perfect. Right? We're not going to wait to trust them until we know that they're not going to make mistakes. In fact, we'll never get there. We know that they're always going to make mistakes. We know that they are full of mistakes, especially when they are young. So it's not so much a question of, can I trust my son or my child, but rather, with what can I trust him? Right? We wouldn't trust a 3-year-old to mow the lawn with a gas-powered lawnmower. Right? He doesn't have the capacity yet. There's a physical danger there. With technology, it's different. It's not a physical danger, and in fact, many 3-year-olds have the capacity. It's amazing how they swipe, watch 3-year-olds swipe. They have the capacity, maybe, to use a lot of technology, but it's the moral danger, then, that we're worried about and that we want to protect them from. So what capacity do we need to train them with? And this training, I'm going to suggest 3 different ways. And they might sound like they have nothing to do with technology, and I hope to connect them for you. But they are indirect training to get at these internal dispositions. And the first one is entitled, Let Him Be Hungry. What do I mean? With tech, we all know, with us, but certainly with our kids, there's this itch that we feel to pick up the phone, to check the computer, to get on whatever device, especially once we've established a habit of it. There's even a phantom vibration syndrome, right, that I'm sure we all feel sometimes. Well, yeah, oh, I thought somebody was texting me. Nope, I guess not. Right? There's this call that it puts on us. And so we need to help our sons develop the virtue of temperance and self-mastery, to be able to say no to that call, right? That's the first thing. And so it's not just with food. It's not just letting them be hungry. My Italian mother, by the way, would go absolutely berserk that I'm recommending that we let kids go hungry. I'm not entrusting my children to her for the development of temperance when it comes to food, but she's a good grandmother, and so she's doing what she's supposed to do. But for us, we know our brains tell us that we're hungry far sooner than we actually are, and far after we've been satiated. And I think a similar thing happens with tech. I remember as a teenager going down, I was, studying, doing homework and taking a break, meandering down and just doing the pantry graze, and just kind of looking around and saying, do I want this? Do I want that? I don't think I want this. And then I remember being like 17, 18-year-old and thinking to myself, man, I'm not even hungry. Why am I here? And you see teenagers, right? And not just teenagers, but a lot of us, we have nothing to do. Oh, take it out, look at it. It's a call, and I need to learn how to say no to that. And food, again, it doesn't have to be about food. Whatever venue we can find in our home that gives us frequent opportunities to teach our children to say no, to use their will to say, even though my body is saying this, or even though my mind might be saying this, to scratch this itch, I'm going to say no. And it's for the good, right? That's what temperance is going to be. That's what self-mastery is going to be. So, if a child learns, no, I have to ask mom to get a snack. I don't go and get it whenever I want, or I can't just keep eating. That boy is going to be more prepared to be given a smartphone when he's in high school or when the time is right by your prudence. St. Maria, founder of Opus Dei and spiritual founder of the Heights, he would talk about how we need to take, in training the will, we need to take the battle away from the walls of the fortress. And what he meant is, don't wait for that really bad moment of temptation to then say, okay, I'm going to have temperance and self-mastery. Work on it on the little things. Work on it on the small things, the things that the ramifications aren't as big, the consequences aren't as drastic. And so food can be a great training ground for our sons, for our children. So snacks, not a huge deal, but a good training ground. And like, the gospel today, we need to be able to trust them in small things, in the little things, in order to then entrust them with larger things. Number 2, let him be bored. We should come to grips with what this is, what we are receiving as human beings when we consume tech media. And it's a really extreme, intense, visual overstimulation. And it's much easier for our kids to say no to that siren song of that experience if they're not listening for it so anxiously. And part of the reason they listen for it so anxiously is because they have no idea what to do when they have nothing to do. And so they develop this need for something, for direct, focused attention. Some people say that smartphones are reducing the attention spans of children these days. And that may be true. I'm sure it's true. But it also may be true that these phones are catering to already lowered attention spans. So what have they developed in, our young sons, our young children, to get to this point where they're such easy fodder for that? And, we have probably read all the stats. It's just, again, common sense to know that our children's lives are more structured than ours were at their age. And I'm sure our parents would tell us the same about our lives compared to theirs, right? There's more activity. There's more directed activity where you do this and then we do this, and they're constantly moved from this to that. And it's structured, and it's formal, and it's organized. And at times, we just kind of get sucked into that as parents. We feel like they're entertainers. We feel like they're party planners where everything needs to go just right and nothing should go wrong. They're constantly saying, I'm bored, and then we need to come up with a solution to that problem. The third graders will do it more than the fourth or fifth because they learn that once they start asking, what do I do when I'm done, the teacher will often just say, I want you to answer that problem. I want you to answer that question. Right here at the Heights, we're going to ask them to say, you come up with what you do, right? They need to get comfortable with being bored. And pretty recent research actually is overwhelming that shows the benefits of being bored. It's boosting creativity, boosting productivity. Here's a quote. "I'm a big believer in boredom. All this tech stuff is good, but having nothing to do can be wonderful too." That's Steve Jobs. They also, I read an article in the Washington Post just pretty recently on how the rise in the mental health crisis, largely in young, is inversely relative to the decrease in free, unstructured time of children. Now, okay, it doesn't necessarily need to be causal, but it's interesting that those have gone hand in hand. So, maybe instead of do we need to think less screen time? Yes, but I think also potentially thinking more unstructured free time for our young sons. Because the resistance to the bad habits that Joe will be talking about more specifically later, it'll be so much stronger if they're used to that boredom and solving their own boredom on their own. Number 3, and finally, is so we have let him be hungry, let him be bored. Number 3 is let him stay outside. We need to train them to say no for the good, right? We need to train them not to have to say no so much by getting them accustomed to boredom. But we also need to ask, what void is screen tech and screen media filling for them? What is it satisfying in them? And we all crave, as human beings, we crave visual stimulus. We're sensitive beings. And I would suggest that our children do not get the sufficient amount of visual stimulus the way God intended it for us. And that is the great outdoors. That's the created world. It's the beauty of nature, being in it, seeing it. And again, the research is there, even, not just in education, but, people recovering in hospitals recover faster when they have windows and can even see trees. That's how much of an impact it has on our being. Imagine for our children who are growing up, and the way that they learn about the world through their senses is taking everything in. And if they get into a point where they are satisfying that human basic need through the beauty, the natural beauty, the way that God intended it to be, all the better. We just recently took the entire fourth grade, up Old Rag Mountain. It is a pretty incredible climb, and they did wonderfully well. And they were the youngest ones on the mountain by 10 years at least. And up at the top, we did a little exercise where, they had eaten halfway up, and at the very top, we asked them to go find their own space away from, a friend or anybody, and we were just going to be silent. For 10 minutes, we were just going to be completely silent. And take in the sights, do whatever you want. You can pray, you don't have to, just look at it. And it was really interesting to watch all these, boys, 8, 9-year-old boys, spread out, totally quiet, taking in this beautiful scene. And then you had a lot of adults going out and taking pictures of them. They were fascinated by this, And it's, on one hand, it's a shame that it's so rare to see something like that. But the second observation I had was afterwards, the boys would come up and say, "Wow, that was awesome." Those are the moments that we need to have our children experience, because it's those real stimulating moments of visual beauty, right? Because the more we take in real art, the more we're going to detest kitsch. The more we read good literature, the more we're going to recognize bad writing. And the more our children take in the beautiful created world in its natural way, I think the less, or at least the more aware and more averse to the allure of the virtual world they will be. So it comes down in the end to this active wonder versus passive consumption. Okay, so that's all. Those three are kind of in the category of training. the indirect training of the soul, of the heart of our children. The second, I'm going to be the most brief with because it's the most straightforward, which is modeling good behavior, modeling good action, good use of technology to our sons. And it really is, they need to see it. They need to see us do it well. So how are we faring in these categories that I just mentioned of self-mastery? That I'm okay with boredom sometimes. I don't always need to take my phone out at all moments, even if I don't have something active to do. Are we filling that void as a family of outdoor recreation? But two in particular, I think this breaks down to in modeling behavior. And the first is detachment. Right? Father James mentioned it really in his homily today. Who is the master? Or what is the master? And am I master of this thing? Do I direct my actions over this thing? Or am I at the beck and call of this thing? And that comes across, right? Are we selective about the notifications that we've allowed to come through? Or do we have knee-jerk reactions to those notifications? Does it, again, does it always have to come out at every red light? They see these things. And they know, who's in charge of what the power is. My 4-year-old loves, asking the question, is it, Dad, who's in charge? Who's in charge? Are you in charge? Well, I don't. And he loves repeating, Dad's in charge of the family, Mom's in charge of Dad. Right? He'll say that all the time. And he says, Dad, remember, Mom's in charge of you? I was like, yeah, okay, got it. Right? But they notice who has the power, do we have power over these things? Number two, so one, detachment. Second, manners. We don't think about this often, the phone or really our technology as a category that we need to be polite in, but it is, right? I mean, we all know the extreme bad examples that we can just remember from other people of, talking in line with a cashier on your phone and you're not really engaging with the person. Okay, bad manners, right? Is the phone out on the dinner table, whether you're out or whether you're at home? Right? Just these little things, and the boys will pick up on those, but that's a great area to model with our sons so that when we go to talk with them, it makes it that much more real. So modeling. And then third, and I would say maybe most importantly, is establishing this relationship, this personal, intimate relationship with our children. And I think in order for them to develop the virtues necessary for us to trust them, these virtues need the proper environment to grow. So that's what the relationship is. It's the environment in which these virtues are most likely. And three characteristics of this relationship. One is freedom. Two is a relationship of encouragement. And three is a relationship of trust itself. So first, freedom. Well, no virtue is developed without agency, without choice. And so whether with technology or other virtues that we're trying to help them develop, are we allowing them to be in the driver's seat sometimes? Are we allowing them to have the ability to say yes or no to a certain thing? That simple question there can help inform a lot of our decisions and our guidelines. And I think, again, getting back to Rich's intro, it's easy to think of this as a problem, right? The tech problem with raising our children. But I think maybe more helpful to think of it as an apprenticeship that we are guiding our sons through, our children through, right? Like, Dad, I get to help you through this. This is awesome. Like, this is going to be a great thing. I get to help you do this well, right? Like riding a bike, there's the couple of different ways you can teach your child how to ride the bike. You can, go find a nice hill with grass. It's not too steep. And let gravity do the work, and it's going to fall over every once in a while. It's not going to be too bad, right? Or there's the dad that you always see with the hand on the back, right, all the way around the neighborhood, and you've got the sore back at the end of the day. It's going to take a lot longer. You could get to the end the same way, but it's going to take a lot longer. So what's the prudence in what's the right amount of freedom? Well, it's a balance. We want to try to avoid the extremes of, I'm going to not pay attention to this at all. I completely trust you. Whatever you do with this thing is good, right? And I'm never going to check on you, and you got this, right? That's an extreme way that, many children are growing up under that environment. Or the opposite extreme of, well, you're just not getting any. You're not going to be exposed to this, period. And as, again, Rich alluded to in his intro, that's not going to be serving our children well, and it's not realistic. A wise father that I have spoken to, and again, I've spoken to so many dads to get their wisdom is, well, you don't want to sleep with both eyes open. You don't want to sleep with both eyes closed. You want to sleep with one eye open. Right? The balance. It's, you're checking on them every once in a while. We're keeping it, it's an apprenticeship. It's trust with that freedom. And then two characteristics that I think help this freedom. One is ownership. Making them feel, again, that they're in this driver's seat. Maybe you sit down when it comes time to sorting out some of these rules. Maybe you sit down with them and make them, ask them, what do you think would be a good boundary here? And you're obviously going to have vetoing power and guiding power in that discussion, and rightly so. And they're going to be far different for someone who's first being introduced to a smartphone, say, as someone who's had it for a few years. What do you think your screen time should be set at for per day, per week? How many pickups should you be thinking about, right? Help them, get them to maybe chart it. Ask them to, it's a process where we're giving them ownership over it, rather than just laying down the rules and say you got to follow it. Obviously, in the end, that is what it is. We are laying down the rules, but to make them feel a part of it, I think, could be an important way. And secondly, knowing that they are going to make mistakes, right? That they are going to not do this perfectly. And in fact, with all virtue, we're going to need to make small mistakes to learn from them. We just want to avoid the big ones. We want to help our children avoid the big ones. And so, again, that'll pointing to the conversations that are coming down the pike as to how to do that well. So that's freedom. Secondly, encouragement, right? It's got to be a relationship of encouragement. And I think this really comes down to, and these are all tied together, so they're kind of intertwined, but our children need to feel driven by our desire for their good more than our fear for their doing wrong. I think they need to be impelled by that and know that that's what fires us up, is them doing great. That's what the leading with optimism. My grandfather was the one who taught me to play golf, and he taught far better than he played, but he would, I remember one time in particular, I was about to hit the ball, I was lined up at a tee box, and he said, stop. I said, what, Papa? Yeah. What are you looking at? And I said, well, I want to stay away from the sand bunker on the left, and, that water hazard is a disaster. I got to stay away from that one on the right. And then he said something that I can't repeat in this microphone because it's being recorded, but basically that was not a good idea. He said, I want you to look down the center of the fairway or wherever you want that ball to land and see it happen. That's where you set your sights. That's where you're looking. For us as parents, do we see the good even before it's there in our children? Do we direct it with our gaze? Because that will help us direct them. And we're trying to help them have that same optimistic outlook towards life. And this comes down to active guidance. Again, themes that are going to keep reappearing today. We need to talk with them a lot about it. It's not just, let's see what happens. Hey, how's it going? Talk to me about your phone. You feel like you're doing well with it? Let's see talk to me about how many pickups today? What's your screen time been at? Okay, what do you think? Can we do better? Or, hey, I'm really proud of you, the way that entire family get together. I never saw you take out your phone. That was awesome. Just that type of actively talking with the guys, in the car ride afterwards or whenever we see the moment. And giving them the feel that we're kind of in this together, that I'm not above the temptations and pitfalls of this thing either. And hey, I've been thinking, I've just been feeling the call of this thing too much lately. What do you say we want to try to get the pickups below 50 a day? You and me. Let's try it. Or you make a competition out of it or something. But again, kind of keeping it away from that antagonistic me versus you mentality, which is going to help them in not just this category, but in all categories of parenting, helping them see that we're in it together. And we know better because we're older. We've made more mistakes, and we are more prudent than they are, hopefully at this age. But, we're still in the same struggles, and we're doing this together. Finally, trust itself. And to acknowledge that, again, intertwined with what I've already mentioned, trust is not just a state in which we can sit back and no longer worry, but rather it can be a means by which we achieve that state, by actually projecting that trust to our children. It's a big part of the sauce here at the Heights, right? What the faculty does to the students. We believe in them, even though we know you're really going to screw up sometimes. I believe in you, and I'm giving you the chance, and I'm giving you this trust. Again, not to an imprudent extreme where we're giving them a likelihood of making that big mistake, but they've got to see that trust, and they've got to know it. And I think this comes down not only to what we do in terms of the rules we lay down, the protections we put on, but how we do it, how we talk to them about it, how we lay it down with them, right? Spot checking that I know Rich is going to talk about, the way that we say, this is something that's just going to happen during your apprenticeship. I'm going to check what's going on the phone, right? And the way you go about kind of laying down that path for them, or that relationship, that dynamic, so you don't get worried that I'm trying to, invade your privacy or anything like that. If you need to talk to a friend about something personal, call them. A good lesson, right? Just call them or talk to them in person. Shouldn't be typing that stuff anyway. And that'll be things that we can talk about. That'll be food for a great conversation. But the way in which we communicate that as a friend who's interested and a loving parent who wants their good, rather than the antsy detective, trying to catch them. We don't, obviously we want to find out as fast as possible if they've gotten on the wrong track. But we certainly don't want to be, hungry for that. So, just to wrap up, wouldn't it be great if we could get to the point of trusting our children? Right? I mean, that is one of the goals here. These protections, yes, necessary, absolutely necessary. But maybe even more important is being able to get to the point where we can trust them. And that means a few things. It means we have to train them, right? So that we can actually get to a point of being able to trust them. It means we have to model good use of technology so that they can trust us. And it means we need to create a good, personal, intimate relationship with them so that we create an atmosphere in which trust can thrive. Because when that happens, then it's going to be like a virtue factory in there, and it's really going to develop. And we know in the end that virtue is going to be our best defense against evil and our best guarantee of the good. Thank you.